in the company of a guy who has legally changed his name to West Wild Hogs, and I think that speaks volumes there. It is important to understand who we're dealing with, and that's what we need to communicate to you today. And we also need to make sure that everyone in at least the southeast United States, and I would suggest the eastern part of the United States, sees this coverage and helps us find this child. West Wild Hogs apparently left home a week ago today from Seal, Alabama with his wife. He told her, "I have a surprise for you," but he wouldn't tell her what the surprise was. So they left Seal, Alabama, and they went north on 75 through Tennessee to Kentucky, to West Virginia, to Maryland, where apparently they rested at a welcome center. From there, they went Interstate 95 south to Charlotte, North Carolina, then back to Tennessee to I-75, and then they came south to Georgia, into Georgia. The wife at about Dalton, Georgia said, "Hey, I've had enough of this. I've been riding around with you," it's now Thursday, since last Monday, about this surprise that you won't tell me anything about. So she gets out of the car and calls family to take her back home to Seal, Alabama. He then proceeds south on 75 and ends up on the evening of Friday the 7th at his grandmother's house in Polk City, Florida. Now, his grandmother's not seen West Wild Hogs in over a year. He stays there that evening, tells his grandmother, "I have an interview on Monday." He's a truck driver by trade, and the bottom line to it is that he knows the roads pretty well. So on Saturday morning, the grandmother said, "Well, I've got to go to work." And he said, "Well, can you give me the address of some Walmart stores?" So she pulls up some addresses of Walmart stores. And sometime between Friday night and Saturday morning, they also have this conversation about, well, have you seen the family, the Rebecca Lewis family, who he knows, the grandmother knows. Apparently, that one grandmother has been friends with the other grandmother, and so there's been a long-time relationship. The grandmother from Polk City goes off to work in Claremont, and he leaves, and that's the last she's seen of him. Well, sometime before 9:30 a.m. on Saturday, he picks Rebecca Lewis up on Highway 98 North, where she lived. Now, let me stop there for a second and say that he lived with the Rebecca Lewis family about 2 years ago when she was an infant. So obviously, she probably, I can't imagine that she could remember him from when she was only 2 years old. But he was made to leave there 2 years ago because he pulled a gun on the family and pointed it. So the mother ran him off. So he's been out of the picture from this family for 2 years. It's not like he's taken off with a neighbor kid who he has been like an uncle to. He takes the child. He goes across the street to McDonald's and spends about 30 minutes there eating breakfast. We've talked to witnesses from McDonald's. We certainly have the clips from McDonald's, as you see on the far side there, and off he goes. The next time we learn of West Wild Hogs and Rebecca Lewis is when he shows up at a BP station in Forsyth, Georgia, off Interstate 75. and that is about 6:30 p.m. on Saturday. He buys drinks. We notice from that video she is now wearing a pink dress and leggings. He's in a light-colored t-shirt wearing blue jeans. We hear or see nothing from him after that time until sometime last night between 10 and 11 p.m., a park ranger sees this Nissan in the Cove Lake State Park off of Interstate 75 in Tennessee near the Kentucky border. The park ranger checks this guy out. He says, "Hey, I'm here waiting on this young lady's mother, Rebecca's mother," which is obviously a lie. And the park ranger said, "Well, the park's closed. You got to leave." Sometime after that, the park ranger sees a bulletin and goes, "Oh my gosh, that's the guy and the 4-year-old child that he's kidnapped." And overnight calls detectives with our sheriff's office. I want to tell you that the FBI and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement have been working with us hand in glove from the very beginning of this investigation. However, the state of Tennessee chose not to do an Amber Alert when we asked them to, because they said there was no evidence at the time that Rebecca and West Wild Hogs was in Tennessee. Well, here's a news flash, Tennessee. He was there. They did a missing persons. It's important for the community to understand we're tracking this guy after the fact. He doesn't have any cell phone. He has no way for us to track him real time. Law enforcement agencies all over the Southeast should be aware that he has kidnapped this 4-year-old child. If they aren't, I hope they watch your news broadcast, because we've sent it out on all of our formal systems. But someone in the community is going to pull up beside this guy or pass him on the interstate. He's got Alabama tags on the car, and we'll provide those tag numbers for you. We're trying to look at the person. We know he's bipolar. We know he suffers from depression. We know that he doesn't have a criminal history at all. We know that it's very important that we find him and return Rebecca to her family. Is Rebecca in immediate harm? She's certainly in immediate danger. We don't know what his proclivities may be or may turn into. But we know this: without the community's help, without law enforcement help, we know he has and feels very comfortable driving the highways. That's what he did for a living. And we see him driving a route, and currently driving a route on the interstate roads. He showed no evidence of hurting the child based upon what we see at the BP station, based upon the interviews we did. Last night, his interaction with a park ranger was calm, cool, and collected. He didn't offer to run. He didn't offer any violence. He only offered to lie and keep possession of this child. Here's a message for West Wild Hogs. Don't you hurt that baby. You keep that baby safe and take her to a police department, a sheriff's office, a fire department. You turn her over to responsible citizens at a church. We'll worry about catching you later, but we want that child back right now. Any questions?
Sheriff, do your investigators have any idea where he could potentially be headed at this point? It appears he's made a northern trek on I-75. Do you think he'll deviate from the interstate at this point? Have any idea what he might do?
We don't think he's actively running from us in the sense that he's running, because he's followed the same pattern so far that he followed when he took his wife on this same ride last week. Do we anticipate that he'll move further north into Kentucky and over into West Virginia and Maryland and back loop around to 95? We don't know where he is or what he's doing, because we missed our last best opportunity to recover the child last night in that state park in Tennessee, where, by the way, they didn't do the Amber Alert because they didn't know he was in Tennessee. Well, here's a news flash. He probably was not in Tennessee now, but I suggest you go ahead and do the Amber Alert. So someone in Kentucky, West Virginia, someplace, he's riding the interstate roads. At this point, he does not appear to be violent. We hope it stays that way. We just want the baby back. If he'll just give us the baby and drive off, we'll worry with him later on. The most important thing we can do now is recover the baby. Someone will see him at a rest area, at a convenience store, at a gas station, at a truck stop. He's very comfortable in those areas. He was in a state park. But last night, the low temperature was in the low 40s. And we got a 4-year-old child that's out exposed to the elements in the backside of a car.
You mentioned his wife and how he had some sort of surprise for her. Are you guys thinking that maybe this young girl was the surprise and he had been planning this for her?
We don't know if that was the surprise. He's been disabled as a truck driver for 2 years. He's depressed. He's bipolar. We don't know if there ever was a surprise, because he seemed very satisfied with his wife just driving the interstate roads, which, if you think about it, as a truck driver, he's very comfortable. That is his comfort zone. So when he lost his wife to ride with him, he shows up at his grandmother's house. He's not been here in over a year. He's not seen this family in over 2 years, and he's forced to leave there because he ostensibly pulled a gun. Did he show up there and just see the child early in the morning out in the yard? Did he go into the house and take her out of the bed? That's the answers we don't have yet. But we know this: he absolutely has this child, and now he's continued with this pattern of driving the interstate roads. We think someone, someplace that pays attention will see this gray silver car with these Alabama tags. He is about 5'8". He's 5'8", heavy set with red hair. And she's a little bitty, beautiful 4-year-old child. They ought to stick out. And all we need is someone to tell us, to dial 911. And if some good old boys see it, they can hold him and separate her and hold her till law enforcement get there. Just help us out. We want the baby back. We want him, but not near as bad as we want her. We want her safe and secure, and then we'll chase him down if we have to do that at a separate time, so he can put her off at a safe location, or some good old boys can help us by grabbing the girl and holding him, or you can just follow them and dial 911 until we can get local law enforcement there. We've got all hands on deck. We're doing everything we can, but he has no technology in his car that would allow us any real-time tracking. So we're having to do this the old-fashioned way, and that's through communications with the people we serve across the state. And you know what? Someone today will see him and can make a difference in the life of this child.
Sheriff, what's the standard policy when you're issuing an Amber Alert? Would it be unusual for them to have done it before there's any indication that the girl's even in the state?
You can issue Amber Alerts. We check specifically. We know that that Tennessee issued a missing persons, but would not elevate it to an Amber Alert because at the time, they didn't have any evidence that the suspect or our victim was in Tennessee.
And you asked them to issue?
We ask every agency to put out all the broadcasts that were possible. And the reality of it is, how many people have kidnapped a 4-year-old child and are driving around willy-nilly in the United States? It's not like. It's a hard lift to think, well, they've left Florida. We've seen them in Georgia. The next state on the interstate is Tennessee. But be that as it may, we just want them now. And the reality is, the communication from Tennessee somehow got to this park ranger. It was just too late.
What do you think the difference would have been if it were an Amber Alert versus a missing person? I mean,
We don't know. I would like to think that once you issue Amber Alerts and you flash this information all up and down the interstates, that this guy, with his bipolar and his depression, may not realize that this big deal's going on to begin with. He may go, oh my gosh, I've upset somebody. He may pull into a rest area and ask someone to call 911. He may not know that we're trailing around behind him trying to find him. He may think that he's just taken off with a family friend, which is not, because he was made to leave 2 years ago after pointing guns at this family.
Do we have any information about whether or not the route he's taking or traveling, if maybe he traveled that route as a truck driver or with one of his former employers? Or
He seems to be comfortable on the interstates. We know he was a past truck driver before he was disabled. We know he's suffering from some depression and that he's bipolar. We know that he doesn't have a criminal history. He doesn't seem to have a proclivity to be violent other than that one episode that we're told about 2 years ago. So what we're hoping is this guy's just grabbed the child for whatever reason in his mind and is out just riding the highways. But let me ask you something. How would you want us to be reacting today if that was your 4-year-old child? Our detectives have been chasing him and all the leads we had all weekend as if it were their 4-year-old child. Now we need the community to help us as if it was their 4-year-old child. And when you do, we'll find her.
Did his wife provide any sort of insight as to whether or not he took medication for his bipolar condition, or if he even was armed or still had weapons at this?
He is not taking any medication for his bipolar. And when the wife left him, he was not armed, according to her. But there's been a lot of time between when she last saw him on Thursday and today. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the apparent lack of cooperation in Tennessee. What is the sheriff's office doing in some of the other states he could potentially be in? Kentucky, you mentioned Virginia, West Virginia, this route he took through Maryland. And are you having luck with some of those states and specifically trying to contact media in some of those markets to make them aware of what's happening?
We are receiving extensive help in Tennessee. They only didn't put out the Amber Alert. They have really bent over backwards, TBI. We have contacted local, state, and federal officials all throughout the United States, and particularly in the Southeast. Our detectives have literally worked around the clock to learn all we could about him and to try to put together and pattern his activities. We're patterning him after the fact. We're not around in front of him yet. And that's why we need the community's help. What I'm asking today is the community start looking for this 4-year-old child like it's their 4-year-old child, and we'll have this thing solved pretty darn quick.
Sheriff, do your investigators know how he made entry into the family home?
We don't know whether or not he made entry into the family home. We just know that he has the child. We know that the child was seen in bed by the 16-year-old sister. And then when she woke up about 9 or 9:30, the child was not in the house. So they looked for the child for a couple of hours before they even notified the sheriff's office. He, whether he got her from the house or whether she was outside scampering around and playing and he picked her up in the yard, we don't know. But he took her to a McDonald's in North Lakeland in the 6200 block and spent about 30 minutes there eating breakfast and talking to people with the child in his possession. So we're praying for the best and we're preparing for the worst. But we have worked this around the clock, and that's why we're making this concerted effort and have with the media all weekend made this effort that, look, we can broadcast this here in Florida because he may turn around and come back to Florida. But we need this in front of him. We know that he's gone from Polk City to North Lakeland to Forsyth, Georgia, to Interstate 75 at the park right at the Kentucky line, and he's moving north on the interstate. So help us out. If this were your baby, you'd want her home. And we want her home. And her mother wants her home.
Just had an indication he's in Nashville, 228 this morning.
We just received information, Scott told me, that he was apparently spotted in Nashville at 2:28 this morning.
He's still alive.
So he's not in custody. He's at large in Nashville at 2:28 this morning.
We'll get you those details as soon as we can.
Is there anything you would say to the general public if you see him, approach, don't approach, contact law enforcement?
The ideal situation is if you see him and her together, dial 911. But I can tell you that it would be totally appropriate to talk to him. He doesn't appear violent and like, hey, tell us about the child. Try to carry on a conversation while someone else dials 911 and tries to get help there. But I'm certainly not above a bunch of good old boys grabbing that 4-year-old girl and getting her away from him and holding them until they can dial 911. I don't care. I just want her back safely. And like I said, he does not give us the indication at this moment that he's been a physical danger to her. But we don't know until we have her back what has been going on. And we want her back sooner rather than later. So we know right now, as we talk a little bit after 9 a.m. Eastern time, and he was last seen at 2:30, we're still 7.5 hours behind him. We've got to get in front of him.
Sheriff, just to be clear, was she with him when he was spotted in Nashville? Do you know that?
The indication that I gave you is what I know this second. We're following up. Our detectives are following up on those leads right now.
What would you say to him if he sees a news report about this story?
West Wild Hogs, we want that baby back. We want that baby back right now. All you have to do is go to a church, go to a fire station, go to a police station, go to a responsible adult at a gas station, at a truck stop, and say, hey, dial 911. They're looking for this baby. But we want the baby. Then we'll fool with him. There are kidnapping warrants out for him. He's not my concern right now. I only have one concern, it's that 4-year-old baby. Anything else? Help us out, folks. You all have the most powerful communication tool available to us. We're 7.5 hours behind him that we know of right now. And he can drive at 70 miles an hour on the interstate roads. And now he's over at Nashville. So you can see that he is moving again. He's gone from near the Kentucky state line back to Nashville. Once again, the FBI and FDLE has been huge help to us. Other law enforcement agencies have bent over backwards. I shared my frustration that TBI didn't do an Amber Alert. That apparently is their internal rules, but they did do a missing person. Somehow, after the fact, the park ranger knew about it, but we need to ramp up everybody in and around the state of Tennessee and get to work. It's time to find her. Thank you very much.
As soon as we get more details of that sighting in Nashville, we'll send it down.